What are your thoughts on energy vampires who drain everyone around them and create some of those blocks on our spirits? And how can we push through that? Yeah, what a great question. Push through that and help them at the same time. All right. This is a multifaceted question, and thank you so much for asking this, Michael Scott. So I think of an energy vampire. They're draining our energy. They feel so less than. They feel like they're not enough. They're not lovable. And they believe that they have to get their energy from others. And the number one thing that we can do for them and for ourselves is to not give it to them, to not engage, and to just see them as a divine being who is learning through being an energy vampire. So the other thing is, I do a lot of chakra readings. So I can see people's energy and their chakras and what's going on. And so one of the concerns, Mike, I'm pretty sure that you have, is that affecting you? Do you get any of their yucky energy, their dark energy? And it's rare when I do a chakra reading that I see energy from somebody else on a person, but it does happen. And that's really easy to release. That kind of dark energy is very easy for me to release, okay? I don't spend a lot of time, any time actually, protecting myself from other people, because the number one thing you can do, Mike, is be in your light. You are an aspect of the Creator. You are light and love.
What is up, everyone? This is your boy, Michael Yerby. Like I said, we are live with Unfiltered Fridays. I have a wonderful special guest for you, and she is an amazing individual. Just looking her up, doing a lot of research. Cheryl's story starts with deep pain, but turns into a powerful purpose. After losing her brother, she fell into sadness and depression. But one day, while sitting on the beach, she saw a bright white light and felt a strong message from her brother's spirit. That moment changed her life. That's amazing. She began to heal, letting go of pain, finding peace, and learning how to help others do the same. Today, Cheryl is a well-known spiritual coach and healer. She turned and started her Star of Divine Light Institute and created her own healing method. She helped people for over 30 years, especially women, break through their pain and find their power. She also is a best-selling author, speaker, and retreat leader. And today, she's here to share her story, her lessons, and her heart. Please help me welcome Cheryl Stelte. Thank you.
Thank you. It is truly such an honor to be here with you today. Thank you for the amazing, well-researched introduction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Man, you have so me just getting this episode booked, and I just wanted to do you justice. And I was like going through everything because like I said, off camera, you and just people in general, I'm very, very fascinated, right, about people, because no person's story is the same. And we all have struggles. We all have pain that have defined us in ways that either you see it in people who have kept them down, that they are not willing to deal with. And you, going through pain, have found a true purpose in that. And that, to me, is just simply amazing. You lost your brother to suicide, which left you in a period of profound grief and, severe depression. Can you paint a picture where you were emotionally at that lowest point in your life, and how losing him kind of set the stage for your spiritual journey?
Yes, absolutely. And it was he took his life soon after I had divorced my husband, so I was already, not in a good place, but feeling hopeful for my future. And so it was quite soon after that my brother took his life, and it just felt like my whole family fell apart. He was 30 years old, and it was beyond devastating. And it was like I could never really understand it. It's just the hardest thing to accept, even though I was living in a different city than my family, I would go home at least a couple times a year. We celebrated Christmas and that sort of thing, and would go in the summer. And, and the last time I had seen him was not long before he took his life, and I had no idea, no idea. And we had such an amazing time together. So at least I had that.
Yeah.
But when his spirit came, and as you described it, it was this bright ball of white light, and I saw it with my eyes closed.
Wow.
It was just, and the amount of love was unbelievable, unbelievable. And so his message to me to start meditating, to really get on a spiritual journey, so to speak, was completely unexpected, and nobody I knew was doing anything like that. It was very strange. Very, very strange. And I just see that, I even look back at it today. And if he wouldn't have been there, I don't know where I would be in my life.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
where would I be? What would I be doing? Who would I be? Because it set me off on this trajectory of healing and empowerment. And I am still eternally grateful.
That right there is I would say, the single most interesting thing I have ever heard someone say, especially when a family member of theirs, committed suicide, right? And you being so transparent and saying, it rocked our family. I could just, I think about my own family where things have happened, not to that degree, but have devastated my family dynamics. And for you, I mean, obviously, I guess you wasn't looking for that type of healing to come into place, but when it did, how you recognized it and took it for what it was and grew from that is simply amazing. I understand that everything changed from that moment on the beach. And like you just described, can you take us back to that day? Like you kind of described it already, but how did you feel in that moment? How did it affect you moving forward?
Well, in that moment, I just had tears streaming down my face, the amount of love. To this day, I haven't felt that intensity of love. It was beyond, and I've done a lot of work, and I really felt the love of God, the love of the universe. I've had some experiences with ecstasy, and to me, ecstasy is all love. It's just love. But that was just, it was so stark, the contrast, such a stark contrast. And interestingly, my friend and I he was able to communicate through my friend that I was on the beach with. And then eventually I could hear him as well. I could communicate with him. And then I went home after the weekend and, told my family what happened. And my dad was like, no, she's imagining it. And it was hard for my family members to accept.
Yeah.
And self-doubt started to set in. Like, did that really happen? Was it something? Because I missed him terribly. I really, really missed him so much. I just, so I thought maybe psychologically, I made it all up.
Yeah.
But then my sister-in-law explained to me that she spoke with one of her colleagues. She was studying educational psychology at the time, and she was going for her master's degree. And it was actually I can't remember. I think it might have been an instructor said, oh no, these things do happen. And the self-doubt period is normal. So then I was questioning it. But then I called him back one day. I'm like, if you're really around me, let me know. Yeah. And then I could get a sense of him and could hear him again. Okay. And that I couldn't deny it. I couldn't make it up. That feeling, it was because the way he would speak and kind of his mannerism was totally him. So it was, and so I started meditating. The severe depression fell away. And I thought I would way rather use meditation as my medicine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than these pills.
Yeah, 100% so. And I believe, like, I'm starting on my meditation journey, and I believe there's a lot of healing in meditation because you have to me, I feel like, and the reason why I kind of resist it in a lot of ways, because I have to sit with myself, and then sitting with myself, my mind kind of starts wandering. And then, everything becomes more focused. Depending on where you are in your life, you start to really, really start playing back the bad stuff in your life, the things that you've been through, the hurt, the trauma, the pain, or depending on where you are in your life, it's the good stuff, the stuff that defined you, showed you that, you have strength. Following your encounter, your brother's message and everything of that nature, how did meditation facilitate such a deep healing for you emotionally and physically?
Well, I first started to learn how to focus. So that wasn't one of my strong points at all. I realized how I had been living my life often really scattered and often frazzled. And so it was first that. But what I realized, I jumped right into a meditation class and I learned to just breathe normally. But then my body, because I grew up in Canada, and I learned I just learned that when I took long, full, deep breaths in the winters as a little girl, my body wouldn't shiver as much. My mom always scared us, whatever you do, don't breathe through your mouth, your lungs could freeze and you could die. Yep. Sometimes it was just so cold. So I kind of learned that, and that started happening in my meditations. The emotions, the repressed emotions started to come up because, I'm in my 60s. I lived back in a time nobody talked about their emotions, and it just, it wasn't okay. There were very few emotions that you could express, anger or joy. And that was kind of it. And there was nothing in between there. It wasn't a part of our everyday living. So here, these repressed emotions, a lot of emotional pain started coming up. And I noticed that if I kept breathing with a full breath, then they would dissipate and I would feel better. And so over time, I continued to do that. And I practiced multiple modalities. I mean, so many. I practiced and studied shamanism with quite a focus for about a decade. But to me, that was not meditation. It was totally different. Didn't use the full breath. It was two very different practices that I was doing. And then I studied, but I learned how to do shamanic healing and that sort of thing. But it's, I haven't been depressed since. Sure, I can get down. I mean, life happens and everything serves us in our growth. So I started to see, especially after my divorce, how that marriage served me in giving the opportunity to grow from it. And so I used that for a number of years so that I wouldn't end up in the same place. Yeah. Because, eventually I started dating again and I started noticing some similarities in these men. And I thought, I'm the common denominator here, right? Gotcha. So I need to look at me, what's going on with me so that I can change that. And, and it was very early on that people could see I was changing, my friends and that sort of thing. And then asking me for my help. Can you teach me? And how can I do this? And then when I started a spiritual interior design business and really did a lot of healing through that in various ways, helping my clients heal, discover who they truly are. And then I would, help them decorate, renovate, even to doing additions and that sort of thing from who they really are. Because a lot of them I found they couldn't make great choices for themselves. Well, I think this, they're in their heads. I'm like, no, how do the colors make you feel? What is this? How does this shape make you feel? What about this finish, And so living from a different perspective and making the best choices for oneself. Yeah.
And you know what? I thought just a little bit as we talk about the interior design, especially with the spiritual journey, I always thought like that was a bunch of hogwash, right? And then until I read the case study about McDonald's, and then McDonald's uses that, to incite someone to want to eat, to want to feel stable and stay into places. And I learned that a lot of companies use a lot of interior design, especially with colors and different things, to invoke emotions out of people, which I never knew. And so I find that very, very interesting that you kind of you had the foresight to start a business like that and really help your friends first, because that's your core. And then from there to actually start helping clientele. That's pretty awesome. That is pretty awesome.
Thank you. Yes. And it's really, we want to make our environment reflect back our soul and why we're here,
Mm-hmm.
at the deepest level. But one of the things, nobody that I can think of when they introduce me mentioned the retreats, mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that I like to do retreats. And I thought, oh, that's fascinating, because I just came back from leading a retreat, a small group of women. It's, I think it really is just sort of the gold.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the gem, the shining light of what I do. And I remember, so I'd been meditating, doing that sort of thing. And then I started reading about vision quests. And so I did my first retreat by myself, for myself, on Galiano Island, which is just a tiny little island off Vancouver Island in Western Canada. And I slept at the top of this hill, overlooking the ocean, overlooking Active Pass, no tent. I just had my sleeping bag and a thermarest, and I made a circle with rocks, and I slept under the stars, and I fell in love with the bats coming out at night. All these bats would come out, and I'd just be looking at them, it went from dusk.
Yeah.
And I stayed in that circle, for 4 or 5 days. And when I remember I would meditate and journal and cry and dance. And I just processed all this stuff that was in me, and going deeper and deeper and deeper. When I came out of it, it was like all the plants, everything in nature was talking to me. I was so connected. It was unbelievable. And I told my boyfriend at the time, I said, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to help people. And I don't think I even knew about group retreats yet then. I just saw, and what I really realized, I got the message on that retreat or that vision quest, that it's all about going back to the center. And we really are all spirit and form.
Yeah.
We really are all a part of God, of Source, whatever. We are all connected. We're one. And it's when we access that, we discover the truth of our being. It's so amazing and really indescribable. And he said to me, well, I think you would need to do some training or something like that. That's serious stuff. You can't just take people out. And nobody I knew thought that, this was just a normal thing. Most people, they were all just kind of shocked. What are you thinking? What are you doing? I'm like, oh no, I'm doing this. And so I remember that time, and that was, I think, 26 years ago, that first time I did that. And then an opportunity came up. I was with a spiritual school, and they decided they were going to do some training on how to do retreats for people. And then I've, over the years, just modified and recreated. And so these women, my advanced students, it was just incredible. And it's like breakthroughs every day, discovering the truth of their being and who they're going to be in the world, and knowing their lives are changing drastically. One of the women just said, I have never felt so much joy in my life. They all anyway. So that's something that I do all this work, but then that is life-changing, so transformative.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
No, I don't doubt you. It's amazing. Basically being able to go and take someone on a retreat and actually have them open up. And you did kind of say something earlier when you were saying how people around you started to notice your change, right? And I know probably some people couldn't believe it, one, because it's you, because you know how people, to know who you are, they kind of put you in this kind of box, right? To try to, I guess, understand and define. And sometimes when you act outside of their expectations or that box, right, it becomes it bothers them, right? And so when you was talking about this healing, especially with your friends and family, I wonder if anybody has said that sounds like some hocus pocus mess. How did you respond to that initial skepticism that they was having about you on your journey?
I just learned to accept it, that's okay. That's where they're at.
Yeah.
I don't have to let them condition me.
Gotcha.
We are all conditioned. We all condition each other.
Yep.
Condition. You look at humanity, my goodness, how we are so conditioned that we need to be this way and that way and this way and that way, and that life is this way. And we think we're solving all these problems, and then we create more problems to solve, and on it goes. And so it's, it's kind of what I do. I help you release all your conditioning so you
Yeah.
can see the real you. And it doesn't matter what other people think or feel. And that still comes up. It still comes up when I do something or think of doing something really different, move to a new level. That old conditioning can still come up, but it's sort of like, flicking a mosquito off your arm.
Yeah.
So there it is again. Okay. And releasing it to a new level. Because when we move into our greatest light, when we move to a new level that, we are the light and we shine on our darkness, what else wants to be healed? What else do we want to let go of? And you become a clearer and clearer being as time goes on.
And that is so true. Honestly, man, like for me, I would say starting, when I was starting my healing journey, a lot of times for myself, it's scary in a lot of ways because it's like, man, I didn't notice about myself. And I'm like, I live with myself, 30 plus years and I didn't notice about me. And it's pretty scary, the stuff that, kind of comes out you, especially when you're trying to, free yourself or heal yourself from not necessarily toxicity. I would say fear from the unknown, fear from, what you was, like you said, conditioned to be. I mean, I find that so pivotal. I wanted to go to, and talk about your empowerment of women because I find that very, very fascinating and freeing also. You're taking them on these retreats as a retreat leader, you growing them, especially the interior design stuff as you're doing. What changes do you mostly hope for when you inspiring women and coaching them through their healing process?
Well, the number one thing you were just speaking about is fear. We're always going to have the fear. If you think you're going to get rid of it, I would like to know your secret. Okay. And so I think of it like this. If we learn to accept fear and even treat it like an adventure. So to know that the fear is going to be there. And a lot of times the greatest fears give us the biggest rewards. So I think of it this way. I've traveled a fair bit. So I'm in this town called Baños in Ecuador, and I'm going to go rappelling down waterfalls. So I go down these little waterfalls and it's like, wow, this is super cool, super cool. But then there's a really big, long one, huge. And it's over this cliff and this waterfall is just going. And I'm terrified. I am terrified and I'm shaking and I'm like, just use your full breath. Just use your full breath. And I want to do this, but this waterfall, you have to walk over and you're at the edge and you're holding the rope and you have to lean back, and it's a few hundred feet down.
Yeah.
It's a long way down. And this water, there's so much water. So you're standing in this water and you take a step and then you fall off the edge. And you just hope that all your gear that you're held in place. So you go down the waterfall and you have to push your feet up against the cliff and all this water is coming down on you and it's a lot of force. So I'm doing pretty well and I'm rappelling and then my foot slipped. My foot slipped on the rock and I lost my footing and I'm dangling there. And then the force of the water is just unbelievable. So then you have to try and pick yourself back up so you can get going. And then the water isn't hitting you as hard because you're out of it a little bit. And I got to the bottom. I was higher than a kite, higher than any drug or anything could get you to. I was on top of the world for hours. 4 hours. And so the fear, Susan Jeffers wrote the book. I read it when I was your age, maybe even younger. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Fear will always be there. And so to let yourself feel the fear, and you think of it this way, fear is often on top of other emotions and the subconscious beliefs, and anger is the same way. Anger helps us. If you feel anger about something, just let yourself feel your anger. Breathe through it with a full breath, lower abdomen. That helps you access your subconscious. What else is going on? So, my most recent book, From Block to Powerful, all my books, all the work I do is helping women. And I do work with some men. Don't get me wrong. I like men, against men, but helps you release those emotions and get down to when those subconscious beliefs were formed, which were often before the age of 2. even in the womb. And then we heal it at that level and we release all that energy. And then the new truths will come in, these very uplifting emotions, and you start to change. So it's a release of the old conditioning that all of our souls signed up for.
Yeah.
Your soul signed up for your family. Your soul signed up for all your lessons. And then we start to rediscover ourselves anew. I can talk to anybody these days. And I remember, when I first started on this journey, I was very shy and mousy, had a hard time even stating my opinion and that sort of thing. Goodness, how I like to share my opinions now.
Yeah. And I think that's how, I guess we've been defined, because it's like, okay, like, yeah, I'm nervous about this, but hey, I have an opinion. Everyone does. And let me share it and not be scared of it. My wife is very interesting. And the reason I enjoy when you talk about empowering women is because my wife, I find she's very, very in tune. Like, we can walk in the room and she can be like, hey, this happened over here. Like, especially me being in the military, sometimes I have her come to the section when we're having things to get together. And she's like, hey, one of your guys over there, he seems kind of sad. I'm like, him? You don't look sad. And she's like, yeah, I'm like, okay. And I learned to take that as a mental note, because a lot of times she can just read things in a room so fast. And sometimes I guess I as a guy, we kind of conditioned not to. And so I love hearing how a woman like yourself get with other women and kind of like train those senses to be like omnipresent, to be aware as they move forward, and not to retreat from that, but to embrace it. I find that very fascinating. So yeah, man, thank you. You having your leap of faith, and then, the early years of building this new life of yourself. If you face some tough practice, practicing realities and stuff like that. You being a single mom, you live beyond the poverty line, not on welfare, but somehow you got through it. You told yourself, like, I'm going to be okay. And I think about it as I was doing my research on you. That was like a huge leap of faith. Where did you find the courage and the belief to press on your spiritual calling when there was really no guarantees, that you doing this, to helping people, would put food on the table for your family? Did you wrestle with self-doubt during that time?
Did I ever, And sure, I was scared at various times. I first got a job.
Yeah.
I had a job.
Yeah.
But I was making less than I would have made on welfare. And I looked at the longevity of that, and I thought, how am I going to really provide for my kids? Yeah. And I just couldn't do it. I just thought, I'm employable. I can get a job. Yeah. And then an opportunity came along for me in commission sales, believe it or not. And so my spiritual business was my side hustle. Mm-hmm. And that was really great. And then I learned sales, and I was the only woman in the industry. I was working in the renovation industry. There were no other women, and it was all energy efficient home improvements and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I did very, very well. It was unbelievable. And then when I got the guidance to go back to school and study interior design, I was scared. I'm like, we're getting by just fine. I finally have this certain amount of success. I'm providing well for my kids. We can go on vacation. Everything's peachy.
Yeah.
Why do I want to interrupt that and go back to school?
Yeah.
But it was, and I remember it so well. I'm in this store called London Drugs, and I get what I'm going to buy, sort of like a Walgreens. And I'm walking out of the store, and there was this calendar, it's like a community college level, not university. But this calendar, this book is sitting there, and it was like it was pulling at me. And I looked at it, and I'm like, I'm not going back to school. There's no way I'm going back to school. And I walk out of the store, and I could feel this calendar pulling me. So I go back in, I pick up the calendar, I put it in my bag, fine. And I get home, make myself a cup of tea. And then I'm like, what is going on here? What is going on? Yeah. So I sit down with my cup of tea. I open up the calendar, right to the page of this interior design, this very practical
right there
interior design program. And I was like, I'm not going back to school. There's no way I'm doing well. That would be crazy. And where am I going to get the money? You know, there's tuition, and then how am I going to live? And so I'm in fear. And then I'm reading through everything, and I thought, wow, am I ever qualified for this?
Yeah.
I'm so qualified for this program. So I thought, well, there was an information session. So I thought, I'll go to the information session, and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to everything. And all I could think was, I'm so qualified for this. So I meditated on it, and I really got to take another step and just talk to someone at the school. So I talked to this woman, long call on the telephone. And I thought, okay, I'm going to need to borrow some money if I even consider this. And I'm doing so well in my job. You know, I'm still working and everything, but I would say the level of fulfillment was dropping. So yes, it was doing well, but there wasn't a whole lot more for me to learn. And I think we all need to be learning, you know, all the time. So that was going on. So I went to the bank and I told them what I wanted to do. And I said, can I get a student loan? And he said, well, we wouldn't give you a student loan, but we'll lend you the money. We'll lend you the money to go to school. And I said, okay, well, that's for the tuition. And he said, yes. And I said, what about my living expenses? You know, and he said, we'll loan you the money for that too. I said, really? And I said, well, how am I going to make the payments for when I'm in school? We're going to loan you the money for the payments. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. And I said, how can you do this? And without collateral security. And I had a very good credit rating. I paid my bills. And I said, how can you do this? He said, because research shows that when you invest in yourself, we're going to make more money off you over the long term with your, you know, your deposits and all the banking services, right? I said, you're kidding. And so I was like, oh my gosh. Then I was really scared because I had no reason to say no. So that was it.
Yeah.
So I went to school, and I went for one interview. I finished top of the class. And then I went for one interview with this one design firm that did feng shui. They did a lot of feng shui, was pretty new and in. And the woman was 35 minutes late for my interview. And I was just like, I'm not doing this. You don't have, I respect your time. And there was no phone call, nothing. So I left, and I thought, there's no one else I want to work for. I'm going to start my own business. And I did. And my instructor in school, when we were covering marketing, I talked about starting my own business, and she really encouraged me to work for someone else first. And I said, okay. But my tagline for my business, it was Stelte Design, designing for the soul. And she said, you don't want to do that because you're ruling out 80% of your potential market. You're only going to get 20% of the business. And I said, that's okay. Those are the people I want to work with. And it worked.
It's kind of crazy, especially when you talk about marketing, because like, especially with like the different podcasts and different things, they say, hey, make sure, you know, you really, really niche down accordingly, right? So you can have something very unique, and don't worry about the audience building. They said, from there, your audience will build accordingly because it is such a unique asset. And it's funny how you was told in marketing, because you was a niche thing, that you was ostracizing the 80%. But the 80% wasn't like you. So it was kind of amazing that you still, even though you're a part of the minority, you still have the intrigue of the majority, because no one does it or will do it like you.
Right. And niching down wasn't much of a thing back then. It was, no, you want to appeal to everybody. That was more, you know, we're talking quite a while ago. And that was more the sense of marketing. You want to appeal to everybody.
Wow. It's amazing how things change. You know, you said in a quote, we said, we all are powerful beyond what we can currently imagine because our blocks are getting in the way. Please expound upon that. What are our blocks? What are the things that are keeping us from recognizing our true power, uncovering that hidden strength?
There are our subconscious beliefs. So when things happen in life, I'll give you an example. So all the women I work with, they've all done a fair bit of personal work, to some many, many years, even decades, and they want to go deeper. And they all, Cheryl, you go deeper than anybody else. But one woman I had on retreat once, whenever she was alone to meditate, she just was really uncomfortable. And I could feel her, part of her kept wanting to leave the retreat, wanted to leave the retreat. And I said to her, are you afraid to be alone? And she said, no, consciously she was not. But what she discovered when she went deep enough, she went back to a time when she was 2 years old, not a conscious memory, a subconscious, it was in her subconscious. Her parents would fight and her mother would leave. And she was always terrified. So she didn't realize at the retreat that this kept coming up for her.
Yeah.
And the stakes are kind of high when you're on retreat. You're really going inward. There's nowhere else to turn, like you said. Going into meditation, you're facing yourself. And then what ended up happening for her was she realized she's never really alone. None of us are ever really alone. And then she was able to go very, very deeply into the retreat. But so she, as a 2-year-old, she learned it's really scary to be alone. My dad is here physically, but he's not here emotionally. I'm not connected. There's no connection. And I don't know when mom's coming back, if ever. She's only 2. A 2-year-old cannot, they're processing at a certain level, but really not processing because she couldn't share her emotions. It was never talked about. So she's holding all this in. And she grew up, I have to take care of myself, that sort of thing. And so we are powerful, all of us, beyond what we can imagine, because we're all conditioned. We all have those subconscious beliefs, so many of them that are limiting us. I could never imagine calling myself a spiritual leader, a spiritual coach, teacher. Never. It was beyond my imagination. I couldn't come up with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a possibility. And so when I help these women, they break through to more of who they truly are, and their worlds just open up, and this deeper understanding of why they're here. And so in the beginning, when I work with people, we don't set goals, because if you set goals, you're setting them from your current conditioning.
Okay, I was going to ask that. Yeah.
It's like, why would you want to do that? You're keeping yourself more mediocre. So you clear all the blocks, and then the goals become apparent.
Okay,
Then
you're
just in your knowing. You're in your truth. You're in your essence, and it becomes very clear. So it's sort of like when I was led to interior design, that wasn't in my world. And the universe, God, is supporting us all the time. That's what that was about. It was like, here's your next step. And the divine plan will always unfold as we lighten our loads, as we become clearer beings.
It's something that you said that was very interesting when you said you went on your first retreat, you meditated, you journaled, and then you said you was doing a lot of crying because of, you was freeing yourself of a lot of things. And I think even to, my own life and how there have been, I would say, barriers and blocks like you was just discussing, and how I have a lot of regrets, not taking chances on a lot of different things. In your meditation, does that come up, and how do you deal with those things that in one instant, it looked like a regret, and then another you have to deal with the choices in which you had to make?
Okay, that's a great question. So regrets are complex. I did... trying to think of my only real regret. I don't have a lot of regrets. I guess because I've started to see that opportunities come around again. So if you don't take hold of an opportunity, it might come full circle in 10 or 15 years in a whole new way.
Gotcha.
Okay? Because you're a divine being. We are all divine beings, and we are always attracting to us opportunities to grow. So that is always happening. And I used to have a regret. My one big regret was that I stayed with my husband as long as I did, with my first husband. But it's not even a regret anymore. I don't have any regrets, because I just saw that that's what it took for me to do the learning and the growing in order to leave him. I'm just one of many women and that sort of thing. And so if you say there's, the lost opportunity, It's okay. What did that regret teach you? What can you learn from that regret? What was it that held you back? And you heal what held you back. You heal that kept you from the opportunity, and the opportunity will come again in a different disguise.
100%. No, you're 100% right. So since we're live, we had a guest that actually asked a question. So, we've been talking for a good little bit. So everyone, if you have questions, please, we have the chat open. And Mike asked a question. I'm going to put it up on the screen right now.
What are your thoughts on energy vampires who drain everyone around them and create some of those blocks on our spirits? And how can we push through that? Yeah. What a great question. Push through that and help them at the same time. All right. This is a multifaceted question. And thank you so much for asking this, Michael Scott. So I think of an energy vampire. They're draining our energy. They feel so less than. They feel like they're not enough. They're not lovable. And they believe that they have to get their energy from others. And the number one thing that we can do for them and for ourselves is to not give it to them, to not engage, and to just see them as a divine being who is learning through being an energy vampire, So the other thing is, I do a lot of chakra readings. So I can see people's energy and their chakras and what's going on. And so one of the concerns, Mike, I'm pretty sure that you have, is that affecting you? Do you get any of their yucky energy, their dark energy? And it's rare when I do a chakra reading that I see energy from somebody else on a person, but it does happen. It does happen. And that's really easy to release. That kind of dark energy is very easy for me to release. Okay. Yeah. I don't spend a lot of time, any time actually, protecting myself from other people because the number one thing you can do, Mike, is be in your light. You are an aspect of the creator. You are light and love. And so you can imagine that. You can imagine it in your chakras or just the center of your being or your heart chakra, and you're radiating that out. So you see yourself as a divine being. You look at the energy vampire, you see them as a divine being, and this is what they've chosen to learn through. Okay. It's an opportunity for growth for them. And so what happens when you don't engage and you just see them that way and you don't get triggered? Yeah. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Being around narcissists, energy vampires, they'll do their little dance. They'll do everything they can to get energy from us, and we fall for it. So it's also an opportunity for us to stay in our center, to stay in our power, which really is the love and light, and remain in that. And great practice makes perfect. Yeah.
Man, that was good. Also, there's another question I guess he had is multifaceted, and here we are.
How can someone protect or strengthen their Manipura in dealing with burnout? Someone I know is dealing with some struggles of hard work and effort they put in and are receiving pushback from upper
powers. What they do is powerful, and I don't want them to lose sight of their goal and impact.
Okay. Well, burnout is a very serious thing. I suffered from burnout once, serious burnout, where you don't have energy. And I'm going to broaden this a little bit. And there's what I call the 4 core wounds. And these are all subconscious beliefs. And they are not necessarily in this order. I am not enough. I'm not good enough. So another one is I'm unworthy. Yeah. Another, I don't matter. And the fourth, I'm unlovable. So what happens when we have these records playing in the background, we will overwork ourselves. We'll spend so much time because we think we're not enough. It's not conscious. But when I first had my interior design business and things got going and I was becoming, more and more successful, and I was working some long hours, and that's when I suffered very, very serious burnout. And I really had to look at that. Why? So now I'll never overwork. You can't pay me to overwork. I'm like, no, I need time here. I need time for me. But it's a pattern. It's a wound. It's a wound. And so to not don't blame anybody for anything ever. No blaming. you turn it around and say, how is this serving me?
Mm.
It's pushback. Do you really have to work so hard? You don't. Do you think God wants you to work so hard that you're burnt out? No. And maybe that's what you have to do to learn from it. So it's spending time in your center, because especially when we suffer from burnout, we can't think clearly. We're exhausted. We're not functioning properly. We're not at our best. And so there it's spending time inward and really looking at your life and what am I all investing my time in? And so some of that effort that you're putting into working needs to be put into play or relaxation, that sort of thing. So what I did, I shifted my energy to putting a lot of time into kayaking, getting on the ocean, because that was so much fun and it creates balance. You know, we all know about balance, but how many of us walk that?
Yeah.
How many of us walk that line and say, oh, well, I didn't get that done this week. It's okay. I'm going hiking with my friends. Done. That we become the priority.
Yeah.
You know, to not put everything else first. Burnout is very serious, but it's a way to learn. What's your subconscious belief that you would create that for yourself? Own it, and see how you can change and grow and become the person you really are.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing. You evolve from this like curious, spiritual minded girl in Alberta into a healer, teacher, author, you know, and a CEO of an institute, you know, which is amazing. We kind of discussed it before when you said that, like, you couldn't even imagine that happening. When you reflect on how you are now versus the younger version of yourself, in what ways have you changed the most in your personal journey and level? And how was that walking on the spiritual path for so many years shaped you into the divine human being you are today?
I would say I am bold in ways I wouldn't dream. I definitely, I'm pretty bold and unapologetic. I'm still doing my work. You can ask these women. I was just on retreat yet. You know, I still share that I continue, but you know, I can absolutely, I'm so committed to my work and the people I work with. The depth of commitment, because I experience unity consciousness. We really are all one. And I believe I feel in my being that my soul was called to be born at this time to do this work, period. And I get more joy, besides spending time with my granddaughter, I get more joy out of doing my work that I can't imagine. You know, I thought, I'm in my 60s, you know, people retire. And I just got over it. I'm like, no, I can work till I'm 70. You know, I can still have another 7 years. Maybe I'll have another 17 years. Who knows? But but it just fills me up. Yeah. You know, it gives me such energy, and to know that I'm contributing. You know, like I never used to think I would ever be one to leave a legacy. I remember years ago, I had a friend, you know, I really need to leave a legacy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. This. And I thought, you know, I'll never be enough to leave a legacy. Oh no, I'm leaving a legacy.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm leaving my imprint on humanity, and just hoping and praying for the best for all of us, that we evolve and grow. It's a fabulous time to be alive.
It is. And it's amazing how you said that imprint, that fingerprint, that, you know, a fingerprint is uniquely yours. And for you to leave it on someone, or a situation or thing where someone says, you know, they tell a friend or a family member, you know, I was down bad. I was going through this situation, and I had this spiritual coach. I had this person who was very aware, who's very intent to help me draw some things out of me. And because of that, I am now ... you know, and for you to be able to say that is completely amazing. In one of your previous interviews, you mentioned every single soul on the planet has to come here to grow. I can see when you're talking about, you know, we're uniformly conscious, you know, that really resonates like with your, you know, life story. I think about like, what lessons or challenges are you still excited to tackle? Because you say you can still do this for, you know, heck, 16, 17 years. that you want to tackle next on your spiritual evolution?
It's such a good question. Where I am right now, and this is, I feel pretty vulnerable sharing this because it's new and I've never talked about it, but I'm seeing that, I have a number of programs and they're all fantastic. People really grow from them, but I have not focused as much on the retreats. I've been doing, like one a year and the group retreats, and I do private retreats as well for people. I've been doing that for a very long time, but I'm really seeing that I feel like with the state of the world in so many aspects that I need to step it up a bit. And so my next level is I'm looking at doing quarterly retreats now.
Okay.
And so it's because they're just so transformative to have breakthroughs every day and often more than one breakthrough a day. And then one's world opens up. And I feel like that's the highest level I can contribute right now to others to support them on their journeys. And it's not about than them. I've just been doing this work longer. And yes, I have the retreat training. I have a lot of spiritual training, that sort of thing. And I'm still on my journey. And the other thing is the retreatants, I always learn from them. There's always so much that happens that they get 2 readings a day, not just chakra readings. Like I meet with them in person twice every day and I do a reading and I let them know where they're at, what practices they can do and how to move the energy and get more light, and I see all these things, like we're all so unique. So of course the energy is unique. So it's very personalized. It's small group. I do all the cooking and it's about receiving, for them to receive the nourishment. And so it's through that as a vehicle that I'm seeing how that's how I'm being called to grow. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
This is my next growth curve. And so then what happens, then my stuff comes up. Is it going to work out? Can you do these things quarterly? I'm normal. I'm human. And it's like, okay, well, I've done, I just somehow, I just believe somehow I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And you are, when you was talking about like how you do the retreats, how you do the cooking. I remember one time I was at my first base in Minot, North Dakota. So it was close to Canada. I think it was like an hour away from the border, right? And in that place, it's very isolated, very cold. And I was going through a tough time. I had a girlfriend in which she kind of broke up with me haphazardly, really crushed me. And I remember I had a supervisor. His name was Lamont Prentice Coleman. That dude really saved my life because I was on the phone with him. I was down and out. And, I probably gave him some indication that I was going to probably hurt myself or maybe, that is not good. So, we talked a little longer on the phone. And then the next morning, when I say bright and early, this man woke up and he's knocking on my door and he's like, get your, HIT. You coming with me? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, he like, get your stuff, you come with me. And I was like, no, he like, I told you, you getting your stuff. So long story short, I got my stuff. I went to his house and I stayed with him that weekend. He cooked for me, barbecue, and we just kind of like had our moments where he was barbecuing, having people over, but we was talking throughout, and he was like a wise old sage, if I should say that. And he guided me through a tumultuous time in my life where I think if I didn't have someone, so careful and caring to, like you said, draw things out. Like, for instance, you giving somebody a reading twice a day where you're talking to them and you're kind of drawing these things that they not even perceiving are probably issues, and you're seeing it directly and you're able to call it out and speak on it. That's what I find so amazing about the work you do. And if no one says it, I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for it, because it is a selfless work, because you're making yourself vulnerable to those emotions, to those feelings, to those things that really have caused a lot of pain in their lives, and to take it with so much grace and to be willing to be open to it. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is yours. Tell the people what you got going on so we can support you in all that you do.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this. You can, I'm not real big on social media. Instagram is kind of the place I am off and on. And so if you want to say hello to me there, that would be awesome. And I do get onto LinkedIn occasionally, but what I want to say is, the chakra readings that I do are just worth your time and money. They're not a lot of money. I think it's $75 and it'll say 20 minutes, but I always stay on longer. And it's the number one, it's the best way for me to be of service to you, to help. It's mostly to validate so much of what you already know and to answer your questions and how you can have your path forward. And if you're interested in meditating, I give you some of my free meditations. If you're interested in personal growth and you want to develop yourself, it's the easiest and quickest way to get a sense of the work I do. And then, I have my 3 books. I always suggest you start with the throat chakra book, Heal Your Neck Issues and Let Your Throat Chakra Shine. And there's a number of companion meditations that you can get with that book as well, where I'm leading you on your journey. And it really is all about saying yes to yourself. Yes, I am enough. Yes, I am worthy of my own personal and spiritual growth. Yes, I matter. I know I'm meant for more. And I'm so lovable. And saying yes and stepping into the unknown, even if it's scary, especially if it's scary. And you can find me on starofdivinelight.com. That's my website. If you just really want to talk with me, you can use the URL callwithcheryl.com. And Cheryl is Cheryl.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing. It has been one of the most best interviews I had, because I feel that I learned so much from you, and I appreciate you, and thank you.
Thank you so much. It has truly, truly been such an honor.
All right. Peace, guys. Until next time.